Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
You're learning Mishna Kiddushin, Perek Gimel, Chapter 3, Mishnah Yud Beis, Mishnah 12. Kol Mokim. Any situation. Now we're talking about here, of course, a marriage. Sheyesh Kiddushin, that Kiddushin does take effect. Ve'ein Aveira, and there's no sin involved in the marriage. Okay, you got that? A marriage in which the Kiddushin is effective, Kiddushin takes place. The status of Kedusha, that a woman becomes Mekudeshes, married, takes effect, and there's no sin involved in the marriage. Havalad haylech achar hazachar. The lineage of the child will be to follow after the male, meaning to have to follow after the father. The Ezeh, and what's an example of that? So Kohenes, Leviah v'Yisraelis. This refers to a Kohenes, meaning the daughter of a Kohen, or the daughter of a Levi, or the daughter of a Yisrael, Shenisu'u l'Kohen or l'Levi l'Yisrael, who got married to a Kohen or to a Levi or to a Yisrael. So, if the father's a Kohen, what's the status of the child? Of the boy? Kohen. If the father's a Levi, the child's a Levi. If the father's a Yisrael, the child's a Yisrael, no matter what the mother is. Okay, so therefore, here we have this is the example of this first rule that Mishnah says about when determining the lineage of a child. If it's a situation where the Kiddushin takes effect and there's no sin involved in the marriage, then the halacha is that you follow the male. Now, the Bartanura points out that this is not a hard rule, because I can give you an example of a situation where the Kiddushin takes effect, and there's no sin in the marriage, and nonetheless, the child will not necessarily follow the father. And that is an example, for instance, of let's say, a ger who marries a mamzeres. You know, we're going to get more into who people are allowed to marry, who can marry whom, but we know that a ger, a convert, can marry a mamzeres. A mamzeres means a woman born from a marriage in which there was not even Kiddushin effective, besides for the sin. Okay, so or her one of her parents was a mamzer. So the ger married a mamzeres, and there's nothing wrong with that marriage. The Kiddushin takes effect. There's no sin involved. What's the status of the child? Not the father's status of a ger, but rather the child's a mamzer, a mamzeres. So this rule is not necessarily a hard rule. It's a general rule, but it's not always that way. There are exceptions to it. Okay, so that's the first rule mentioned. Next, v'chamakim sheyesh kiddushin v'yesh aveira. In any situation where Kiddushin takes effect, but there's a sin involved in the marriage, which means there's a prohibition to marry, there's a lav, there's a prohibition, negative commandment about a marriage with such a person. Nonetheless, though, the Kiddushin takes hold. Our Mishnah follows the opinion that even if a marriage is forbidden, if it's only forbidden with a lav, with a prohibition, there's no, as we'll see, there's no kares, there's no death penalty involved in the marriage. The Kiddushin takes hold. So it's effective. They're married. She can't go ahead and marry somebody else, even if someone who she could marry, because she's married to this person, just she's not allowed to be married to this person. Now, in that situation, wherever the Kiddushin takes effect, but there's a sin involved in the marriage, meaning if they cohabit, Havalad haylech achar hapogam. The child follows the blemished one, the one whose lineage is blemished, is tarnished, as we will say. The Ezeh. What's an example of that? Su almana l'kahin gadol. This will be an example of a widow marrying a kahin gadol. Can a widow marry a kahin gadol? No, she cannot. When she marries a kahin gadol, when she cohabits with a kahin gadol, she becomes what's called a chalala. As a chalala, if she would get divorced from the kahin gadol, she couldn't marry another kohen. Her child is going to have the status of a chal or a chalala. So you had the kahin gadol, you had the almana, she became a chalala by cohabiting with him. Now they have a child together. The child is what? A kohen or a chalal? The answer is no, a chalal. You're following the pugim, you're following the blemished one. Next example. Grusha v'chalutza l'kohen hedyet. Very similar example. A regular kohen marrying a divorcee, who the Torah forbids him to marry. Or a chalutz, a woman who had chalitza, instead of her brother-in-law doing yibam on her because his brother died without children, instead of marrying her, he freed her through the process called chalitza, and that's a rabbinic prohibition for a Kohen to marry her. So in these examples, that's another example of, again, this Gerusha, the divorcee, she was already forbidden to go ahead and marry the Kohen. But besides being a divorcee, by marrying the Kohen Hedyot, she also becomes a Chalala. Just give me 1 second. Okay, I guess it means she also becomes a Chalala. By the Chalutza, she for sure, either one, the point is that she becomes a Chalala, and therefore, as we're going to see, that as Mishnah says, the child follows the blemished one. Now, the truth is, these women can never marry another Kohen. They can't. But the point is, though, what the point of the Mishnah is, though, is that besides having the prohibition of being a Gerusha, they also become a Chalala, so to speak, a desecrated one from Kahuna, and that's going to carry on to the child. Or Mamzeres or Nesina Yisrael, a female mamzer. Again, she's married from the union of someone who the union is punishable by kares, by death, or from the parent who's a mamzer or a mamzeres. A regular Jew and a mamzer or mamzeres may not cohabit. An asin is a descendant of the Givonim, a group of Canaanites who tricked Yehoshua into making a peace treaty with them. They are forbidden to marry ordinary Jews. And therefore, that's another example of where the Kiddushin takes effect. Kiddushin works. It's only a prohibition in all these examples. And therefore, it's an example of there is Kiddushin, but there's a sin in the marriage. Bas Yisrael mamzer and a sin, or let's say a regular Jewish woman who marries a mamzer and a sin, the male form of a mamzer and a sin. In these cases, the halacha is that the child follows the pagam. So therefore, you have a Yisrael and a mamzer and a mamzeres. What's the status on a child? Mamzer or mamzeres. If the Bas Yisrael marries the mamzer or the Nesin, what's the status of the child? Mamzer. So there you've got a fulfillment of this idea that where you have Kiddushin, the Kiddushin takes effect, but there's a sin in the marriage, you're going to follow the blemished one. And as we said before, even a situation where there's Kiddushin and there is no sin, let's say a ger and a mamzer, the halacha still is going to be that the status of the child is that of a mamzer. Next case, v'chomi she'ein la'alav Kiddushin. That's a situation where that this person cannot make Kiddushin on her, avol yesh la ala chayrim Kiddushin, but other people could. That would be what we call an erva. An erva is a person who the Torah says is a forbidden relative. The union with them carries at least the punishment of kares, of death, of spiritual death called kares. The kares is a heavenly death, not a death, not a capital punishment. But where that punishment is involved in that union, the Kiddushin doesn't take place. And therefore, when you have a situation like that, so for instance, where you have a person marrying his sister-in-law, okay, his wife's sister, and his wife's still around, the child from that is a mamzer, because that's an example of where he, the one cohabiting with her, can't make Kiddushin on her. If he tried, it wouldn't take effect. But if other people wanted to marry her, sure, why not? They're not related to her. That's not their sister-in-law. Other people could make Kiddushin on her. The child from that union is going to be a mamzer. The Eizeh, and what's the example of that? If that's a situation where anybody cohabits with one of the arayas in the Torah. Now, also included in the arayas is a married woman, right? You can't make Kiddushin on a married woman, right? And in a union with her would definitely carry a death penalty. So that also would be an example of where the child would be a mamzer, even though it's not like other people can make Kiddushin on her where she is right now because she's married. But otherwise, if she would get divorced, she could. Well, it would apply to anybody else. I'm not sure if that really fits into the example of others have Kiddushin on her while she's married, while she's an Eshes Ish. She's married to someone, no one can make Kiddushin on her. However, there is that aspect of the fact that there is no Kiddushin on her, and therefore anybody besides her husband who cohabits with her and has a child, the child would be a mamzer. Now, v'chomi she'ein la alav, lo yalav, lo yalachem kedushin. And anyone who doesn't have on her, not he or not others, kedushin, meaning a woman who you cannot make kedushin. No one can make kedushin on her. No one. There's no one that can make kedushin on her. Kedushin does not apply to her. And they have a child, havlad kamaisa, the child would be just like her. Ve'ezeh, what's an example of that? Zevlat shivcha v'nachris, the child of a Canaanite woman slave or of a woman who's not Jewish. A woman who is a shivcha Canaanite, she's a Canaanite slave. No one can make kedushin on her. There's no kedushin. There's no possibility of kedushin on her. As long as she is, if she gets freed, she becomes a convert. Then you can make kedushin on her. But while she is a shivcha, there is no kedushin on her. And therefore, if somebody were to cohabit with her and have a child, what's the status of the child? Follows her. Let's say, and the child is considered an eved, considered a slave, even if the father would be a regular Jew. Now, let's say the last case, nachris, the woman is not Jewish. She's the one who bears the child. So you have the man could be 100% Jewish, but the woman's not Jewish. Since she's not Jewish, she's an example of one. There is no kedushin. There is no marriage on a non-Jewish woman. And therefore, the child born from that non-Jewish woman has the status of a non-Jew. The child's not Jewish. So these are the four categories that the Torah makes about how to determine a child's status. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.